The topic of today's webinar is Data Visibility and Digitalisation, the Future of VAT Reclaim on Travel and Expenses. This is an SAP Concur webinar in conjunction with our partners VATBox. Joining us today on this webinar we have Martin Leonard, EMEA FSI Director for SAP Concur, and also Mark Stirling, GM and VP EMEA for VATBox. So this will be our agenda for today's webinar. We'll take a quick look at SAP Concur and the challenges that people see with travel and expense. We'll also look at the data flow from Concur into VATBox and how that can be used for better VAT compliance and reclaim. I'm not going to leave you waiting any longer. I'm going to hand you over now to Martin Leonard to give you a bit more background around SAP Concur.
Thank you, Steve. Before we get started, I'd just like to give you a brief overview for those who aren't familiar who SAP Concur are and what we do. Who are SAP Concur? We're the global leader in travel, expense, and invoice management. We have over 8,500 staff that's located throughout 150 different countries. We have a global HQ in Seattle. On a good day, we're processing over 1 million expense reports. In the last year alone, we've processed over 352 million of them for our customers. And finally, we partner with over 200 industry partners who bring their very own expertise to help us provide a great solution. So what we're here today is to talk about the VAT opportunity on a global scale and also some of the challenges you as a business may face in that process. Here with me today is Mark Stirling, and I'm now going to kick it over to you, Mark.
Thank you so much, Martin. Delighted to be here and to be able to talk about our joint service. What I'd like to start with, however, is to explain the business problem that both of us are here to address and to solve, which is the travel and expense, the data within travel and expenses, and what we call employee-driven spend. So let's start with some numbers. 2018, over $1.4 trillion was spent on T&E, and the forecasts are that's doing nothing but expand, up to 1.7 trillion by 2022. All that spending on T&E is being done by travellers, on the whole, using their credit cards as transactions that are being processed outside of a typical procurement process. We call this the employee-driven transaction. Any time an individual uses their card to make a purchase on behalf of an organisation. In the T&E world, that's pretty obvious. We're talking about a trip I make to America where I'm buying ground transportation to get myself to the airport. I have a flight to get over there, and when I'm there, I stay in a hotel. When I then travel home, I do the same thing in reverse. Each of those transactions is purchased by myself with my credit card or by my company. Most of these processes are not scrutinised in advance, are not controlled by the finance department till the end of the process. And these employee-driven transactions are completely bypassing all the data checks typically put in mature, established procure-to-pay processes for your ERP systems, such as SAP itself. Let me put up a slide now to illustrate exactly the difference between this and show the focus that we are putting as an organization on solving that problem. On the left-hand side is a more typical procure-to-pay process, such as an aircraft manufacturer buying engines. And what you do is you go through a bid process. Ultimately, you choose a vendor, you raise a purchase order, you send the purchase order to a vendor who gives you a confirmation. When they've delivered the goods, those goods go through a goods receipt process. An invoice comes in which gets matched off and gets paid. And every step of this process is being controlled within the finance department, usually by experienced accountants who are able to check every line of that data and ensure that the data that's being processed and that ultimately flows into your general ledgers is accurate, it's been tested, and it's being qualified. That qualified data is then more readily available for the purposes of managing the business and for the purposes of recovering the VAT. In this world of employee-driven transactions, however, the employee is making the purchasing decision, often on the fly, and is being relied upon to make the right choice, to purchase within policy, and to make sure they capture all the information that's needed downstream to not just validate the expense, but to recover the VAT. And what that means is, regardless of systems in use, this data as it flows through into your T&E system and into your VAT recovery processes is usually not qualified, because it's being entered by people whose day job and whose skill set is not in the determination of the VAT appropriateness of the transactions that they are processing. And this is precisely where the integration of your T&E system and our recovery service will come in to help. So by way of illustration, when we look at the data that flows into our servers, typically the first time we come across an organization and we haven't yet helped them mature their VAT process, or where they're not in a controlled environment, we will find that 62% of the invoices or the receipts that we get coming into our service are either part qualified or are not qualified for the purposes of VAT recovery. And there are various reasons we see that, some of which I've put up on the slide here, which I'm sure you'll recognise. I'm not going to go through them one by one, but the most common case that we see all the way on the right-hand side there is where someone will submit a credit card slip in lieu of the receipt. And no authorities will accept a credit card slip as evidence of a VAT spend. You need to have a VAT receipt that goes with it. Similarly, the mosaics. We don't see as many of them now as perhaps we did many years ago when I first started working, and we were faxing in our receipts. But we still see instances where people will put a number of their receipts together on a piece of paper, scan them and send them in, whereas the authorities need those separated out individually for the purposes of VAT recovery. So it's for that reason that we're here to talk about the integration of SAP Concur and VATBox, and how together we can help with that process. Hopefully, just this brief introduction has highlighted the need to get the data into your T&E system accurately in the first place, so that when you send it through to VATBox and into our service, we have the best quality data for us to process it and maximise your recovery. What I'd like to do now is to hand you back over to Martin Leonard, who's going to talk to us a little bit about spend capture on their side.
Thanks, Mark. One of the greatest things about having SAP Concur is being able to capture that spend wherever and whenever it happens. You can be on a train in Germany, you can be out for a meal in Shanghai. That data is going to be flowed directly into your expense management system. The best part is, whether it's within or outside of company policy, we have ways of capturing that. Things like missing receipts and error-prone spreadsheets, it's a thing of the past. It's a slick system. It can be done on the go for all your travelers. Log right into your mobile phone, and everything can be done from booking to approving expenses. To take full advantage of the tool, we have loads of actionable insights or reporting for you to be able to leverage your data and really find into the nitty-gritty of where things are being spent within your organization, who is spending what, and where. We have over 200 standard reports that are built into SAP Concur, and it's in a slick dashboard for you to be able to accurately report and present to your internal colleagues on what metrics and KPIs that you set for your organization. A quote from The Economist states, "The world's most valuable resource is no longer oil, but it's actually data." And that speaks to the importance of not only being able to collate this data, but actually present it and use it for the purpose of your own businesses. Now I'm going to pass it back over to Mark, who's going to talk to you a little bit more about the compliance within your T&E.
Thank you, Martin. So this is where I get to talk more about the VATBox service itself, and answer a question I'm sure is probably on everyone's mind right now, which is, what's all this got to do with VAT? And the answer I want to give, and the reason that we've structured our presentation this way, is to say that the VAT service I'm about to outline is absolutely dependent upon the quality of the data that we have in the first place. And that's what I hope you've understood from the first part of this presentation. Now, within the VATBox side, we then take that data and we work it through our service in a structured manner in order to qualify the data and to maximize the recovery of the VAT that we do on the back of that, whilst keeping you compliant with the rules and regulations in every country that we touch. So let's start with the first question we always get asked, and that is, how do we get the data from SAP Concur into VATBox? And the answer is it's incredibly simple. SAP Concur have a robust API. We work with that API, and once you give us permission by clicking on the App Center link for VATBox, the data will flow through to us and be received by our service. It really is a one-click plug-and-play service. So once we've got your data, we then put it through our service. And whilst the service is not a linear process, the easiest way to understand and describe what we do is to think of it in terms of extract, match, and validate. Now, I've got a few slides coming ahead that will go into these in a little bit of detail. What we're doing is we receive the data, we bring it into our service, and as you would imagine, we extract it from the API, we populate it into the VATBox service and start trying to make sense of the data. The matcher is a process that's about understanding the trip, what was happening on that trip, because the handling of the trip determines what we can do with the VAT downstream. And then once we've understood the trip, we then validate the receipts. We validate the VAT situation so that we know what we can do with it. And we're looking for a number of things in that data. And I've got some examples here on screen that we would particularly be calling out. Of course, as you'd expect, if the receipts are missing, then our service will discover that. And we'll probably go back to the employee or to the company to ask for a copy. We're looking for cases like meals, where there's a receipt that shows more than one person was at the table. And if there's more than one person at the table, we need to know who that person was and whether they were a business guest or an employee, because in many countries there's different tax handling based upon that. The next slide, as I move into it, will then start to break down elements of this process for you. Compliance assurance and our matcher technology. This is the heart of our service. The data's come in, we take a look at it. As I said before, we're trying to understand what's going on with it. We will, of course, eliminate duplications through that process, and then take a really hard look at the trip, understanding where you were and when you were there. For example, any business trip that goes over a weekend with expenses happening at the weekend, we need to understand why you were there on a weekend and why you're claiming business expenses. If you're on an ordinary business trip, Monday through Friday, visiting an office in another country, and then you've got weekend expenses, that would suggest you stayed over and had some personal time in the country. If, like I used to do, you're flying to India, flying out midweek, flying back midweek, and having to stay over the weekend, then you've got a business purpose for being in the country over the weekend. This is the sort of information that our matcher technology will look for and seek to understand. And think of it as a separate process. We're understanding the trip almost in isolation of determining the VAT that is against that. And only once we've understood that trip can we then look at the VAT associated to those receipts and what we can do with them. This is our eligibility engine. Once the data has been processed through the matcher and we've determined the eligibility of it, we then make it available through our dashboard for you to take a look at. In fact, our dashboard you can think of as a live view into your data as it moves through the VATBox service. I'm not going to run this as a training course and explain each field here, but as you use our dashboard to view and manage your data, what you'll be able to track is how much data have we received, what's the potential, how much of that have we disqualified because the receipts were incorrect, for example, or how much of that do we think we can still qualify if we can get access to the correct receipts through a reissue style process. We can take a look at the data both from the global level, from the country levels, but we can drill all the way down to the individual invoice or receipt within the system and map it back to the transaction within Concur, so that we can totally understand what was happening and use some of that information to re-educate the traveller, as most people would rather do it correctly and give us the right data so that we can recover the VAT. In addition to that, we will take a look at the data by vendor and help you understand which of your vendors are performing best and providing you with the right information, the best data to help you maximize your VAT recovery. And as I previously mentioned, if the focus initially in our service was to bring in the data, understand that data, and calculate the potential within that data, giving you the insights you need to then feed back to your employees in the event that their behaviours can change, and to understand what's happening with your vendors. The next part of the focus of our service is to see how you can extract additional recovery from the same data whilst still staying compliant. And part of that is quite simply in the visibility that our dashboard will give you, but it's also through the activation of some of our advanced tools that give you specific control over fine-tuning the data. And one in particular I'll talk about is our tax tailor tool on the next slide. Our tax tailor tool has been developed, if you like, to be the culmination of this process. We've sorted our way through your data, we've helped you understand that data, we've started to work on optimization. We developed this tool, we've built in local best practices, tax rulings, to really help guide the local entity directors on which areas they can seek to further optimize the reclaim based upon their local practices. And it allows specific local control, reducing the risk and increasing compliance and reclaim, whilst seeking to minimize inquiries that come back from the authorities on the data once you submit. And that ends my brief overview of the VATBox service and what we do with the data we receive from SAP Concur once you have that system set up and flowing high quality data through to us. Of course, if you'd like to see more as a blatant plug, a member of my sales team would be delighted to meet with you and explain. Martin, I think I'm handing back to you now to take us home.
Thank you, Mark. And I really hope that this presentation showed you the real value utilizing partner organizations such as Concur and VATBox to flow the expense data into your VAT reclaim and realize the true benefits of linking the two services together. So in conclusion, we've gone over everything from your travel booking all the way to your VAT reclaim. Your travel bookings are set by your organization. The workflows and approvals that you set is all built in. That all is going through to approval, and that information is then being extracted by VATBox, is audited by them, and your optimal VAT reclaim is then brought to you as an organization, and really the flow is just as simple as that. In conclusion, I'm going to hand over now to Steve. I think we have a few questions from the audience.
Thank you, Martin, and thank you, Mark. I think that was very informative. We have got a little bit of time left here to get into some of the questions. As I said at the top of the webinar, any that we can't get to now, we'll make sure to follow up with you personally. So don't worry if we don't get to it right now. The first question: Do I have to have both solutions, Concur and VATBox? Martin?
The short answer is no. You don't need to have Concur to be able to utilize VATBox, and you don't need to have VATBox in order to utilize Concur. The added benefit is that API that's set up, and it provides a real-time flow of data from Concur to VATBox, which essentially, rather than sending a flat file every month, it's happening in real time. All the information is being transposed, and that data is working for you instantaneously.
Excellent. Thank you. There are a few questions around GDPR. I guess this one for both of you.
So from Concur's perspective, we are fully GDPR compliant. We use over 800 resources to ensure that we follow all the GDPR compliance rules that are set forth by the EU. Mark, is there anything you want to add?
It's the same on our side. We're fully GDPR compliant. It's super important to us as a business, and it's something that we have regularly tested externally as part of our ongoing processes.
Excellent. I'm an existing Concur customer. What access rights do I need to get to the VATBox connection?
So it's super easy. All your admin needs to do is to log on to Concur and click on the button to grant VATBox access to your data, and that's it.
Excellent. Mark, I think this one might be for you. Is there a setup fee for connecting the API?
No, there isn't a setup fee, neither on the VATBox side nor on the SAP Concur side.
Brilliant. Does the Concur App Store come at an additional cost, Martin?
Not at all. The App Center is available to all of our customers for any app that they want to deploy within their organization.
Excellent. I think we'll make this the last one. We've had it a few times. For you, Mark, is can I see how much VAT I could reclaim?
Oh, great question. Yes, absolutely. As part of our service, we have an evaluation tool that we often run in the sales environment that will do a quick pass across the data that we find in your SAP Concur instance. We'll take a look at how you're spending, in which countries you're spending, and we'll calculate out a good approximation of the recovery amounts we'll be able to see for you. So not just in your data, but country by country within that data. And in fact, downstream, our implementation teams will then use that data in order to target, if needed, which geographies will start in to maximize the initial return.
Fantastic. I think we'll leave it there for questions for now in the interest of time.
So did that...
Just a quick just a quick thank you to everyone that's on the line now. Thank you as well to Martin and Mark. I've got their details up on the screen there now if you'd like to get in contact. And as I said before, a recording of this webinar will be sent to you shortly as well. So if you missed anything, you will be able to go back to it. And I hope you have a great day. Thank you.